This is the news in brief from the United Nations. The horrific attack on a childcare centre in northern Thailand prompted strong international condemnation on Thursday. More than 35 people were reportedly killed, many of them young children, said UN Children's Fund UNICEF. According to the authorities, the attacker, who was reportedly a former police officer, killed himself after targeting people with a gun and knife at a centre in Nong Buao Lampu province. In a statement, UNICEF said that early childhood development centres, schools and all learning spaces must be safe havens for youngsters to learn, play and grow. The UN agency sent messages of sympathy to the families of the victims and issued an appeal for people to refrain from posting or forwarding images and videos of the attack. Did you know that Africa has the highest suicide rate in the world? To reverse the worrying problem, the UN Health Agency WHO on Thursday launched a social media campaign to raise awareness around mental health illness, which is believed to account for up to 11% of the factors associated with suicide. According to the World Health Organization, mental health problems affect 116 million people in the African region compared to 53 million in 1990. 6 African countries are also in the top 10 in the world for suicide rates, while the WHO also noted that for each person who takes their own life in Africa, there are an estimated 20 attempted suicides. Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, WHO Regional Director for Africa, described each suicide as a tragedy. She called for significant investment to tackle Africa's growing burden of chronic diseases and non-infectious conditions such as mental disorders that can contribute to suicide. On average, African governments allocate less than 50 US cents per person to treat mental health problems. This is 5 times more than in 2017, but it is still well below the recommended $2 per person for low-income countries. Prison riots and violence in Ecuador's penitentiary system that have caused the deaths of hundreds of inmates in recent years have not been addressed, UN-appointed independent rights experts said on Thursday. In an alert that followed its official visit to Ecuador, the UN Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture expressed grave concern about the dire situation in various detention centres there. On the 3rd of October, a clash between prisoners erupted in one of the country's largest prisons in Latacunga, killing at least 15 inmates, according to the authorities. The panel cited decades of state abandonment as the driver of recent violence, where detainees have been living in a state of tension and constant fear. Prisons in Ecuador lack essential services and basic resources, said Maria Luisa Romero, who led the UN delegation. And she added that some spaces in prisons were self-governed by detainees who were members of criminal gangs. The independent experts visited 9 prisons in 3 cities in Ecuador, including joint visits with the country's national preventive mechanism. It is mandated under international law to prevent torture and ill treatment. Daniel Johnson, UN News.